Hello, I'm Teresa Peters, and I'm so glad that you've made it here today. You're in the right place if your student writes aimlessly. They don't seem to have a point, and they're not sure what they're trying to prove, or maybe how to do that. You're in the right place if lately your student has been saying, "Why do I have to write essays anyway? No adult ever writes an essay. This is just stupid." Maybe you're thinking that. You're also in the right place if your student is confused about how to do research and how to keep those notes organized in a way that's going to help them to prepare for their final essay draft. So today, I want to teach you to teach your student to influence through ink. The first question you should always be asking is, what difference does it make? And this is the most important question. This is the one your student is asking when they say, "This is just stupid." They're asking, why does this matter? What difference does it make anyway? That is such an important question because writing essays does matter. Even though we don't normally write essays in our everyday life, we are always putting together thoughts and ideas, rearranging them in a logical order, coming up with proofs and ways that we can persuade our listener to agree with us, to believe what we have to say, and to get on our team. These are skills that help your student every step of the way through academics, and most importantly, really help them in their life. Also, writing essays is a long process that students have to break down into small pieces, come back to again and again and again, even though they don't want to. Those are life skills, and that's why writing essays really matter. And writing persuasive essays matter the most of all. So you've probably heard of the writing process. This is a very quick overview right here. You want to do some initial research. It's really important that we don't just randomly choose what we're going to prove. We should be looking at all the angles before we begin. We should determine what is the truth. Maybe what I believe to be true isn't exactly out there provable. Maybe I can't prove it with the research that's available. The next thing we do is create a working thesis. So this is our statement that gives us some direction when we are doing our research. So we discover the different sides, we choose which side we're going to prove. It's really important in a persuasive essay to prove one side or the other. You can't do pros and cons. This is not an about the topic type of essay. The reality is, in the real world and in academics, we don't write about topics. We are always, always proving something. The next thing they do is all of their research, all together. They take notes in point form, and they have to organize those notes in a logical way so that they won't have to redo this step. No one wants to go back and try to find that really important fact in some website somewhere. They know they read it. That's not what we want. So we want to keep notes right from the beginning. The next thing we do is take those facts and those reasons and our thesis, put them all together in an outline so everything is together when our student goes to write. Then you finally write. So the writing process doesn't even get around to writing until very far into it. Next, you revise and edit. And you edit, and you edit, and you edit again. Editing is really an important part of the process, but we're not going to be talking about editing today. Today, we're going to talk about how to do research, how to keep those notes, and how to create a logical outline. I want to encourage you to download the session notes. You'll find the link right there, ready for you. It's a free document, it's editable, and you'll be able to use it again and again. So make sure you get that off the session notes. While you're at it, also get the editable outline template. Then you'll have both of the pieces ready for you. This is the editable research notes template that you just made a copy of. And I have chosen for today zoos as a topic for our research. Just so I have a plan, I have also done a little bit of legwork and found the Britannica pros and cons page where it talks about the pros and cons. So let's just head back here and we'll just talk a little bit about how to take research notes. So first of all, you need to teach your student about how to take notes. They should be able to read a paragraph, find the facts that are most important to what they're looking for. So not necessarily summarizing it. We don't want them to take all of their documents or websites that they find information at and summarize them. That's not going to be helpful for research notes. For research notes, they need to be able to look for the facts that are going to prove what it is they're proving. But the very first thing students need to do when they're trying to prove whether or not zoos are a positive thing or a negative thing is they need to know both sides of the argument. It's really, really important that students don't just go into this and decide ahead of time what it is they're going to prove. And the reason for that is you need to have facts and proof. You need to know all the sides of the argument. Perhaps your reader is not going to agree with you. And if they don't agree with you, you need to show that at least you understand their points in the argument. So the first thing we do is we're going to go and just check out the basic arguments on both sides. And I have that here, the pros and cons. So immediately I'm going to take this URL and I'm going to put it on my research notes document right here. And I'm going to label it A. And that's just so every fact I find from there always needs to be attached to where it came from. Otherwise, when your student goes to write and they try to source and show where they got their information from, they're going to be running around looking at all these websites, hoping they can find where they found a fact. That's just doing things twice. No one needs to do that. It's really important just to keep our notes organized because it's less work. That's a selling feature if I ever heard of one. So the first thing we always do is keep our source. And then we want to take a look. So we can see here, when we teach our students about sources, we need to teach them what's a good source. So first of all, a good source is not selling them something. A good source is not representing one side or the other specifically. So they are not a zoo. It's not fair to expect a zoo to argue against itself, right? They're only going to argue that zoos are good, and they're only going to show the positives. However, we can go to those pages and discover what they say about themselves because we can find their positives and see whether they really are good arguments or not. Second of all, we want to see who wrote this. It's really great if it has an author. This one has written and fact-checked by the editors of Procon, which may or may not be someone who knows what they're talking about. Hopefully they are. This is Britannica, which is a trusted name in information. So hopefully those editors are, someone who knows something. But we don't have any actual proof of that. Well, let's click here and see. Procon editors write and verify new content, update existing content. So this isn't very helpful. It doesn't tell us who those editors are or what their credentials are. They could be writing about zoos, but maybe they are literature specialists. Like, we don't really know. But what they're doing is at least showing that someone has fact-checked this. It also has a last updated, so we can see that it's a recent article. This is not 30, 40 years old. This is something that has been written fairly recently. The last and maybe the most important thing that you want to look for are sources. So we see right in the text, we see that we have sources. They show their sources. All these underlined things just go to definitions for students who don't understand, which is really helpful. But at the bottom of the page, you're going to see their works cited, so their sources. These sources are places where they found facts. They very likely don't say the same things at these sources that the Britannica has written in their article. What they are facts that the writers of this webpage have brought together and come to a conclusion based on those facts. That's ideally what we're looking for. That usually doesn't happen till middle or upper high school. That ability to think outside the box, just to look at facts and come up with your own conclusion. So don't expect that too young, but it is something that we eventually hope to see. So that's a really good sign. This page has pros and cons. That's wonderful for our initial research. In the writing process, in the initial research, we want to be able to see both sides of an argument. So here it is all together. Zoos don't educate the public enough to justify keeping animals captive. Okay? Zoos are detrimental to animals' physical health, and zoo confinement is psychologically damaging. Now, these are all very short sections. There's not a lot here. There's very few proofs. But in an initial essay, these might be about as long as you might get, right? You're only going to get a short paragraph in early essays, like grades 6, 7, 8. Grade 9, 10, 11, we're working at proving things more and more with better and better proofs. And so we have our cons. At the top, they have the pros. So first of all, zoos educate the public about animals and conservation efforts. Now the con down there, the first con was, well, it educates the public, but not enough to justify the difficulties that animals go through. So that would be a rebuttal paragraph in a more advanced essay. We wouldn't expect to see that in grade 6, 7. Maybe starting in grade 8, you might start to see a rebuttal paragraph. So a rebuttal or a refutation paragraph is one that acknowledges one of the major arguments of the opposing side. So if the reader disagrees with you, they can see that you've at least considered this major argument. And it's an argument that you feel that you can come up against, that you can argue against. So yes, they do educate the public about animals and conservation efforts. They are important for conservation for animals that are going extinct. However, zoos might not be the best way of doing that. Zoos cause undue stress on the animal because of the number of people that are coming through and all of these things. So you'd have to find facts for all of that. So that would be a refutation paragraph. The number 2 pro is that zoos produce helpful scientific research. And the number 3 is that zoos save species from extinction and other dangers. Okay, so there are some really good pros there. And what you don't want is every paragraph to be a rebuttal. That isn't very nice to read. It's a very difficult read, especially if you disagree. It just feels very pushy and argumentative. And even though this is an argumentative or a persuasive essay, we don't want to alienate our readers, right? We don't want to put them down. We don't want to slam them. We don't want to make it look like we think that they're just unintelligent. So here we have the pros and the cons. And today, just for expediency, I'm going to use the cons because that's just a very quick argument. So right already, we have our source for A here. And so I'm going to go down to the cons, and I'm going to see what facts I can find. Now, when you have a URL like this that has all these links, you can use this page as the source, or you could also use these sources that they give. You could go back to their original source and use that as your source. So let's try one of each. Okay, we have published in the Animal Studies Repository. It concluded that, quote, to date, there is no compelling or even particularly suggestive evidence for the claim that zoos and aquariums promote attitude change, education, and interest in conservation in visitors. Wow, that is a very straightforward quote. So let's say we want to use that quote. If we're going to use a quote, we can copy paste it. So we're going to go down here. Oops, wrong one. And we're going to say, oh, I'm sorry. Bloop. So we're going to start with con 2 because the first one is really the rebuttal. So we're going to keep this nice and simple today. Zoos are detrimental to animals' physical health. So when you are sourcing information, you can source it from this actual page, like we already have, or you could go and you could source it at their original source. It's okay to use the sources from your source. So that means a lot of the legwork is already done for you, which is really helpful, especially for students who are just learning. So polar bears had infant mortality of 65% due to small enclosures. That's huge. So let's look at how we can put that on our outline, and we'll do it 2 different ways just to see. We're going to show how to do it with the original source from Britannica and also how to do it from the original source. So let me see. Physically unhealthy. All right. So first of all, I'm going to source it from Britannica. So I know that this is Britannica because the URL for Britannica is here, and I've labeled it A. So every place I put an A, that means this information came from the Encyclopedia Britannica Pros and Cons on this webpage. So infant mortality, 65% small enclosures. Now, when your student is writing and taking notes, they need to take notes in point form. And there's a lot of reasons, but I'm going to type this before I forget because otherwise I'll have to go look again. Okay, so we have polar bears, 65% infant mortality. Now, maybe your student doesn't know what mortality means, so they've looked it up, infant death, and it's because of small enclosures. So this is in point form. The reason we use point form, the very first reason, is it stops us from using the wording in the original source. So we are avoiding plagiarism when we do this. Also, some students are going to go, oh, this is some great information, and they're going to copy and paste the whole thing onto their page, but they haven't finished the note-taking. They've just procrastinated the note-taking, right? They're just keeping all this information until later, and then they have to do the hard work later when they feel like this piece has already been finished, and that's going to be a problem. So we want to make sure that they do the note-taking at the same time. So we use point form because it's faster, because we avoid plagiarism, and also when we go to write our rough draft, if we have sentences here, it is really, really hard not to just copy paste them. And what we end up then with is a Frankenstein paragraph. It's just pieces plunked together, and it doesn't flow, and it doesn't sound very good, and it doesn't persuade very well because it's not in a logical order, and it doesn't have any discussion about our fact. It just has fact, 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 right? With an introduction and a conclusion sentence. And that's not really very persuasive. That's not what we're looking for. Okay, so this is one way we could do this. Let's take a look and see if we can find another fact that we can put on there, and we'll use the original source. So let's go down. 70% of adult male gorillas in North America have heart disease, the leading cause of death among gorillas in captivity, although the condition is almost completely absent in the wild. Other great apes have similar health problems in captivity. So number 4, we're going to go down to the number 4 on the sources, and we're going to say, let's just copy this. Okay, we're just going to copy it. And we're going to open a new link, and we're going to pop it in there. Look at that. There it is. Okay, this is the article that they sourced. Amazing. And there's probably more information on here, so we can actually use that one fact and we could find more information. All right, so we're going to first copy the URL and stick it on our research notes. And we're going to put a B beside it to make it different than the other source. And oops, put it in the wrong place. Put it up here. All right, and put a B. There we are. And delete that there. We're going to put our fact here. So our fact was that adult male gorillas highest cause death is heart disease, not seen in wild. Okay, that's fair. And the other thing that we need to make sure is that that's actually in this article. We can't just trust our first source and say, oh, well, they say it's there, so it must be. We can't trust sources. We have to make sure that what they say really was there. Here we go. Like many captive male gorillas, Mokolo suffers from heart disease, specifically fibrosing cardiomyopathy, a condition that turns red, healthy heart muscle to bands of white scar tissue. Roughly 70% of adult male gorillas in North America have heart disease, may die prematurely. Similar rates in others. And hopefully somewhere it says that it doesn't happen in the wild. Just keep skimming. Maybe it's earlier. I don't see where it says anything about the wild, but one thing we can teach our students is how to search the page. So we just press Control and hold it down, and we press an F, and it pops up this little search up here. And we're just going to put the word wild. Oh, look at that. Although heart disease is nearly absent in wild populations, you probably saw that, and here I was looking for it. So it is actually in here, and we could go on to read different information about silverbacks and all kinds of gorillas in this article. All right, so we could do that, but we're not going to today. All right, so that's how we would keep that information. It's really important that we keep this information organized. If you have one massive table with every fact that you found that you might use, it's a really big job to go through it and try to figure out what you're going to use and try to organize it. And even worse, if you try to start writing from that. Like that is not how you do an essay at all. So we want to organize it. So you see how I labeled this one physically unhealthy. I'd want to be finding more sources that show that animals in zoos are ill or dying because of diseases or other health concerns that are not evident in the wild, are only evident in zoos. We want at least 3, if not 4, different facts that are going to prove that. So we want to make sure that we have enough proof already researched that we're going to be able to write this. We don't want to be going back at the drafting stage trying to find more information. That's a really bad time to do it. We want to have all of that organized, all of it taken care of ahead of time. So they're physically unhealthy. Zoos hurt animals psychologically, and we already have physical health. So I would have to find another reason. I'm sure there's lots of them. But we want to copy and paste this table as often as we need to for whatever group of facts that seem to belong together. And it's okay if we don't use them in that order or in that organization later, that's fine. We just want to group them so that we can find them. So, and that the same types of things are together. So it's okay to have, if your student all of a sudden goes down a rabbit trail that interests them, they could have a whole list of facts that they find about something that shows that, zoos aren't that bad just because it interests them, and that's fine. They can keep facts for whatever they want. So this is how we do this. Before we are done our research, we will have at least, in grade 6, 7, maybe grade 8, at least 3 sources that we're actually going to use in our essay. If we're in high school, we're going to have 4, 5, 6, 10 different sources that we're going to use in our essay. If we have 20 sources here, but we only use one of them, that doesn't count. It's only, we want to make sure that we are using more than one source. We have to be using multiple sources to prove our opinion. We can't just go to this and go, oh, look at that. I've got everything off this one source right here. All these facts. I could just write my essay using these facts. They did, but we would be copying their essay. We would be copying their reasons and their proofs. They have essentially created an essay for pros and an essay for cons. So we don't want to just copy that. In fact, parents, watch for that, because students are going to find a page like this and go, oh, sweet, I've got my reasons, I've got my proofs, I can just put these other sources and bing, bang, boom, I am so done, right? That's not what we want to encourage at all. So we have these research notes. They are multiple sources that we're going to use. We have labeled a source code for every single fact. We have point form only, and the only time we have copied and pasted is if it is a quote. And if it is a quote, we also want to copy and paste beside it who said it and why they matter. Are they a scientist? Are they a researcher? Are they a zookeeper? Like, who is saying this thing? Because that's how we know that what they have to say is credible. So that's what we're going to do on our research notes. I hope I've explained that well for you. If not, please get in touch with me. I'd love to answer your questions. The next thing that we have to do is outline our essay. So we're not going to jump from this and just start writing. We're going to move to an outline template, and this is the one you've already downloaded. You probably don't want your student to start with introduction and hook. This is the hardest place to start. Well, how am I going to hook my reader? That's a hard place to start when you haven't really pulled it all together yet, okay? The first thing you do want to do, though, is make sure you have a thesis. You need to have a thesis before you can go ahead and get all your reasons and get all your proofs. Okay, so our thesis might be that zoos are harmful to animals, and yeah, we'll just stop there. And in the conclusion, we could say, there's research and there's, good things about zoos, but we need to find a better way to do it. We need to find a better solution. This is not good enough. So zoos are harmful to animals. And our first reason is psychological issues not seen in the wild, or physical health concerns not in the wild. All right. We want to make sure, okay, every one of these reasons that we have, and I've color-coded them all different colors, every reason answers the question, why are zoos harmful to animals? Because they cause psychological issues not seen in the wild, because they cause physical health concerns and diseases not seen in the wild, because they offer inadequate environments. Okay? Those are just my 3 reasons off the top of my head and from the research that I had already done in the past. Okay, so we have those 3 reasons. If the reasons don't prove why zoos are harmful, it shouldn't be in this essay. Or perhaps we need to rethink what our thesis is so that we can use those reasons, especially if they've already filled in all their facts. We don't want to tell them, oh, this doesn't count, right? We want to say, can we come up with a thesis that will include all of the reasons you have and see if they can come up with something, or if you can help them come up with something. So this is where we get to copy and paste now. We are going to go, I'm going to move this up because it's physical health. We're going to go over here and we're going to say adult male gorillas. We're going to copy that and we're going to move it to our outline. And we're going to say this was at source B. And polar bears, oops. Source A, all right. And add more lines as you need. So it is really important that students understand how these word processors work. Like they can save so much time. Just little plus button, you just hover to the side on Google Documents anyways, click a plus, right? It'll just add it right in there just like the rest. So they should have 4 or 5 different proofs for why their reason is true. Then when they're done that, they should look at every single proof and ask, does this answer why or how do I know that physical health concerns are seen in zoos but not in the wild? Prove that. Or prove that physical health concerns are seen in the zoo and not in the wild. And every one of these should be a proof showing that it's less healthy for animals to be in zoos than in the wild. I hope that makes sense to you. The most important part, well, maybe not the most important part, they're also important. One of the very most important parts is, why does it matter? Okay, this should be on every single reason. Okay, why does it matter? Your reader may not agree with you. And the only way you're going to convince them is to bring it down to why it really matters, or why it should matter to them, why it matters to the animals, why it should matter if they're at a zoo. So we might say, zoos are trying to do research about animals, and zoos are trying to propagate species that are going extinct, but we're creating health problems in those animals. And how can we research animals when we are creating health problems? They're not going to be like an animal in the wild, so we can't study them as though they were an animal in the wild. So we need to ask why it matters. Who cares? What difference does it make? If it doesn't make a difference, then these reasons, they don't really matter. Or, right? No one wants to read an essay about something that doesn't really matter. We want to really drive home to our reader that it matters. We don't want to just have proof, 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 and let our reader come up with their own conclusions, because what they might conclude is, oh, well, you haven't done enough research. You just don't know some of the things I know. Fair enough. Maybe we don't. However, we should try to connect to our reader in a way that is going to help them understand why we care about these reasons and these proofs. And we should be doing that for every single reason as we go. So this will stop the reason introduction sentence, proof, 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 conclusion sentence problem. Because adult male gorillas don't normally get heart disease in the wild, but in zoos, that is the leading cause of death. If we are breeding male gorillas or breeding gorillas in zoos, we're not seeing the same kind of animal that we see in the wild because they have heart disease. What other things are different? So things are not equal. So the research might not be accurate. So we might talk about polar bears, right? And we might talk about that and then give the fact, talk about the fact, give the fact, talk about the fact. We don't want to just plop down facts and let our reader come to their own conclusions because you never know what they're going to come up with, right? All right, there is a section here under each reason. This is where you're going to write your paragraph later. After this is completely finished, after you have gone over it with your student, given them feedback about how they can improve their logic, or ask them questions like, oh, well, that's interesting, but I understood this. Is that true? And, or, well, I see why you might think that, but did you know that? And give them some more information about things because sometimes they just don't see the bigger picture or don't know some things that you know. So that's going to help them to have a more logical argument if they follow those things up. This is how we do an outline. This outline will have every single thing on it that they need for their rough draft. And there's only one thing this outline doesn't have right now. And that is the source code table. So this is an old one. I'm just going to delete it. And we're going to go over here to our research notes. And we're going to copy this source table and we're going to put it on our outline template. There's a very simple reason why we're doing this. First of all, we don't want to go looking on different documents when we're writing our rough draft. When we write our paragraph, every single fact that we put in our paragraph is going to have the source beside it. That's called in-text citations. When your student is just learning, what I do is I just have them put a bracket and then put the source code A or B or C or D. But even if they're doing full MLA standard, they want to put that source code there, A, B, C, D, so they don't have to go looking later, oh, which all of these facts and where did they all come from? When they're doing their in-text citations for MLA standard, they still need to know which fact came from which source and where that belongs in their essay. So if they have A, B, C, D, they just replace that with the in-text citations. And they have all of these links showing them which one belongs to which. It's all in one document. So when they go to write, everything they need is here. They're not running around doing extra research. They're not trying to figure out what words mean. All of those things have already happened. And all of the facts are there. And all of the why it matters is there. And already we have our sources attached to every fact. This saves so much time. The very first time your student writes their draft and does not put all these A/B codes, they're going to realize how much work it is to try to figure it out later. And then they're going to be sold because they don't want to waste their time. Who wants to waste their time? Okay, this is how we do an essay outline. Parents, I have some encouragement for you. I know essay writing is a struggle. I know your students might not like it, but it's so important. And I know you can do this. I know they can do this. It is a step-by-step process of growth every step of the way. It is a process of personal growth for you, for your student. It's a process of writing growth, because every step of the writing process is an improvement or advancement on the last step. So really, essay writing is about believing that you can grow and change. So I want to make sure that you don't miss this parent class. It's on the session notes. All the details, you can just click there. There's 3 days. Choose one that works for you. And I would love to see you there. So thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate you being here and appreciate that you're investing in your student.